Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining. Today, we're honored to be hosting Elie Habib, co-founder of Anghami, on Let's Talk Product. So Let's Talk Product is an initiative by Propeller, which is a venture capital firm based in Jordan that invests in brilliant founders that are building global products. And Let's Talk Product is our way of connecting with the community and creating to learn from people like Elie and creating a knowledge sharing platform for the builder community. So for those of you who don't know, Anghami is the leading music streaming app in the Middle East with over 85 million users. Elie is the co-founder at Anghami, and he leads product development and operations. This is actually his 5th startup. So Elie has extensive experience in building, managing, and shipping products and managing engineering teams. He also comes from a technical background. Elie, there's a lot for all of us to learn from you, but today we want to focus the discussion mostly on 2 key aspects. So first off is just the early days of building and launching Anghami. And the second thing is more on your product development approach and what makes Anghami so special. Now, for the attendees, we will make sure to leave a good 10 minutes for questions at the end. So please feel free to add any questions in the Q&A section as we go through the discussion. Before we dive into this, Elie, once again, I would like to thank you a lot for joining us. And I'd also like to introduce Tam Bijalouqa with us here, CEO at Propeller.
Thank you, Leon. Amazing intro. عن جد Elie is I would say a mentor for all of us all the time. He was always in the ecosystem, and I'm so excited about having you here, Elie, today. Thank you for joining us. To start with, Elie, to start with, I'm really curious about like the early days of Anghami. Like, what problem did you initially start to solve? Like, what problem did you see in the world and had to actually solve it? And how were the early days? Like, did you hire a team? Was it only a few guys? Can you walk us through that?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Lynn and Tombi, and thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, I mean, when I'm asked about the early days of Anghami, it's like when you reminisce. It's like when you reminisce about certain memories that you really care about. And the energy of creating a startup is something that keeps me going to want to create another startup. So creating is a phase that is unbelievably important in the history of any startup. For us, it started simply because I was in a previous company that I have founded, and I was at a place whereby I kind of was bored from what I was doing. It was doing fine, it was growing and everything, but basically I was bored because I had no challenge. And we somehow just happened that we were discussing an idea while on a ski trip, me and Eddie, my partner in Anghami, and it started with him complaining that he forgot to update his iPod with music. And it was the beginning. At that time, it was in 2011. It was just a casual conversation whereby, I did not put music on my iPod. iPhone 3 GS, I think, was born like a year ago. Most of us was keeping music on iPods, but iPods needed you to download music on iTunes and connect and sync it. You had to buy music on iTunes, but there was no iTunes in the Middle East. So what we had at the time, we were like ripping music or downloading pirate music and syncing it over the iPod. And if you forgot to do that, you ended up with last trip music or last whatever sync music. Mm-hmm. And we started discussing what we can do. And Eddie's background is he's a musician. So basically he loves music. And I'm actually the geeky guy who wanted to figure out how can I actually have all the music available on that new phone, because we had a new phone at the time and apps were started to be built in 2011. So basically I wanted to understand how I can do that and how I can put all the music in the phone. For me, that was it. The whole point is if we wouldn't have to sync the iPhones, the iPods if we could actually, using that new app system, have something that would allow me to access all the music. For me, that was it. That was a challenge that I had not gotten for a few years before. And I actually, you know, we started going to Starbucks, sitting me and Eddie every night for a few months, maybe, trying to come up with how we want to approach it from a business perspective. You know, I see right now a lot of startups starting because of technology, right? So, you know, engineers start to connect, you know, we want to do something based on that new technology and how we want to build it using that technology. The idea would make a lot of sense sometimes, but they're starting building based on technology. As far as I know, you know, a lot of startups fail. You know, a big percentage of startups fail, but I'm not aware of a startup that failed because they didn't pick the new technology, or they picked certain technology, not the other technology. Most startups fail because of one reason. I mean, the biggest percentage of startups would fail because they failed to gather revenue, right? So for us, because we had experience, because we had other companies before, we realized that we needed to figure out a business model. So we worked together to try to figure out what would the business model make sense for us to go talk to labels and get labels on board, because we knew we had to be legal. Mm-hmm. And to get labels on board, and it would make sense so that it would create a business, not an idea that wouldn't actually generate revenue. So from the beginning, I think this is the most important learning for everyone, right? It would apply, I mean, to everybody. It's like you start from the idea and figure out how you will end up making money. I'm not saying how you'll be profitable, but even making money in a way that eventually will lead you to profitability is important. For us, this I call it engineering, but it's business engineering, not coding, but it's business engineering. So we started from that. Once we figured out a model, I actually got to the part that I like, which is building the product. The idea was how gonna put all the music on your fingertips. The whole idea, and me, the geeky part in me, was like, we're gonna give, you know, kind of like a search box in an app, whereby you're gonna type a song and it will come up and you're gonna listen to it. That was the core idea. Why? Because we needed that.
That was the MVP, right?
Exactly, that was the MVP. So the idea was, if we can achieve that, then we can actually start pitching anybody to give us money to build it. In the previous businesses that I've made, I've never raised money. Why? You know, remember in 2011, VCs were born in the Middle East around that period. Yeah. So it was the VC shop was a startup at the time. So when we started figuring out how we want to get money, we realized that, you know, we needed to get deals with labels and build. So we could not actually, you know, we did not have any kind of such money to deploy ourselves. We put in, me and Eddie, 165K to start building the idea from our own money, but we realized we needed to get labels. So we went to labels and convinced labels to be part of that streaming idea. For them, the first question is, what exactly is streaming? And yes, if you pay us, we'll give you it, because it's extra money for them in the Middle East. And anyway, they're not selling any digital service in the Middle East in 2011, right? There was no iTunes. So that's part, once we actually had a good business engineering and we did it with the labels whereby it makes sense for both parties. Again, it's important over here is like, we did not build a model that would have skin in the game for us, no skin in the game for the labels, or revenue a lot for us, no revenue for the labels. No, it was actually, if we win, we all win equally. If we lose, we all lose equally. But we're going to pay you upfront, which for them made sense, because the probability of them making money is already there. Us, we might not make money, but at the end, it will work out. So because we realized based on previous experiences that, you know, when you want to build something, a lot of the time you need to partner with someone else. because you can't do everything. For us, we realized that if we can have the labels as good partners, then we can grow the business. Again, for many of you over here, you're not dealing with labels, but you have partners somehow. And if you build on with your partners, you obviously can build it faster. So once we had the deals with the labels, almost ready to be signed up, and we signed a few actually, but we did not have the money to pay. So we signed, and we could actually be sued because we couldn't pay. We went to the VC at the time. I started figuring out, how am I going to get money? I did not want to get a loan from the bank. It was too high of an interest rate. I was reading about the VC concept at the time and figuring out that some VCs were popping in the Middle East. So I opened LinkedIn, filtered by VCs, and started cold emailing them, right? A nice mail, cold emailing for like tons of VCs. I think 20% replied, and most of the 20% were like, I still have the replies, were like, you're smart, you did this, go do something else. Why I want to compete with Apple or whatever? No, it does not make sense, whatever. Eventually, via someone not relevant to LinkedIn, we got the first contact of a VC, and eventually it worked out. But one of the most important phases over here was me not knowing how to deal with VCs, right? You don't learn this stuff. Anyway, you don't learn how to deal with the VC unless you actually deal with the VC. So because I believe experience is important in everything, and you can't get experience unless you do something. For me, the next best thing was reading. And a lot of the things that I've learned in my life, I think most of the stuff I've learned them by reading. Reading puts you in the shoes of someone else and the experience of someone else. So I actually got a good book, which still exists, How to Be Smarter Than Your Venture Capitalist. It's a Brad Mendelson and someone else's book, still exists. It's a different edition, but still exists, which actually taught me how to do a deal with a VC, and what clauses are good, what clauses are bad, what's a ratchet, what's a whatever. There are so many weird words that I've learned. For me, that was important because it allowed me to understand what am I going to be offered. But that part was the easy part, and it was not too fun, but it was relatively easy to get the first $1 million. Again, $1 million in 2011. With inflation, with many VC funds, that must be like 10 million today, because there was like really very few VCs anyway. It was hard to get the first million, but eventually, once we started building the product and we created the MVP, my MVP, a lot of the people, when we talk about MVP, figure out that something that's a minimum viable product. A lot of you might have read the Lean Startup and all of those stuff. We all did. But for me, it was important to understand if it's a minimal product that would be usable, but that people would pay for it.
They tend to forget that, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was very, very, I'll share the link of the book in a bit, someone asked. So basically, it was important to do that. So we worked to create a minimum viable product, but that had ability to convert people. Because I see a lot of people creating a product that makes a lot of sense, and that's probably a good product, but they say we'll figure out how to monetize it later. And when they move from free to paid product, a lot of the people simply vanish because, they're good with a free product. Everybody wants free lunch, but few will actually pay for it, right? Can
I say something that I feel sometimes that people build an MVP for the investors instead of the customer, which is
totally true. And we did that mistake. At the beginning, we wanted, our idea was something. With the discussion with the investors, they told us we should do this, we should do that. And at the time, we thought that, investors know, right? because again, we did not know that they don't know, and they obviously will not tell us that we don't know at the time. So we thought that anything that they would say would actually should be considered as quite important. So we should actually pivot or change anything to make sense for them. We did a mistake on that. As an example, investors told us you should build for the web, not for the mobile. So we started the first several months building for web because that's what the investors wanted. Why? Because the investors knew the web, but did not know mobile. In hindsight, nobody knew mobile at the time. So a few months after that, we realized that we could not monetize web, right? Because I'm not going to compete with YouTube. Seriously. I mean, why would I create a competition to YouTube? Because it would be music and a search box, whatever, that would be not make sense. On mobile, I knew how to monetize it. We had an idea at least, but on web, we could not monetize it. So we lost a few months simply because we followed an idea of investors. Eventually, we switched to mobile. Another thing, that part was important because we realized that we had an opportunity to get mobile operators engaging with us because it was all new, the mobile, and they wanted to, there was like a data usage was growing, SMS usage and value services usage and calls were actually going down at the time. They started going down. So they would want to work with a service that would provide some added value in mobile, and that would make sense for us to do some kind of monetization. So eventually we worked, I had to start working on mobile. I did not know mobile. Previous business was around SMS and MMS and gateways. So I knew mobile operators, but I did not know how to code for mobile. I'm an engineer. So, I mean, I could not know and at the same time follow up on this. So I had to dig into this. And when we launched Anghami, at the time of launching, we were 6 people only. 3 were engineers, 3 were non-engineers. So we had 3 non-engineers were Eddie, my partner, his wife, which acted as the designer for the first 6 years in Anghami or 5 years in Anghami, and the content guy, which actually uploaded music and from the labels to Anghami. And there was me, an iOS developer, and an Android developer. So I wrote the backend of Anghami.
Yeah.
That's simple, right? So we could fit in on one table, and it was quite interesting. So basically, I wrote the backend of Anghami. Someone wrote the iOS product, the Android product, and we launched. It was really, literally as MVP as it can get. But so we started the company in February, late February. In November, relatively, it's a lot of time between February and November. But again, for a product like Anghami, where we needed to have, at the time when building with the VC, the idea was to do an Arab product, Arabic only, focus on Arabic, because we don't have a lot of money. $1 million were not a lot, still not a lot. But we did not want that. So we actually worked with labels and all of that, and did magic at the time, whereby we launched with 5 million songs between Arabic and international with the same budget. So we obviously, that's negotiation. We knew how to do that. And we launched with minimal engineering and anything. But what we figured out that we needed to make sure that it could be monetized. So the first launch of Anghami, the public product, launched in December of the same year. But the private product, we launched in a private beta with a mobile operator. Actually, it was in Jordan with Orange Jordan. So basically, we did a deal with Orange Jordan whereby they will start paying us, right? And they will market us. And we actually did not exist at the time. We launched with Orange Jordan with payment. So that actually was, for us, is like, we validate that, we could get traction with the mobile operators. We could get someone paying at least at the beginning. So in November, 5 November, we launched with Jordan, Orange Jordan. 30 December, we launched to the public, and 16 March, we started consumer billing. I mean, we started opening up, allowing the consumers to pay directly. Mm-hmm. It's a short time span between, you know, November and March to be able to we opened B2B and B2C within those few months. And clearly, those few months were the longest of my life, but the best months of my life, because, you know, we launched in November, we were getting like 100, 200 people per day with no ads, obviously, that we had no money to spend on ads. But then when we started doing ads, I was actually creating, you know, uploading the Facebook ads and whatever, all of them, we learned everything, right? We were the janitor, the everything, right? That's the beauty of, you know, launching a startup, because you have that particular knowledge which you could not get anywhere else when you do all of those stuff. Obviously, with time, I did not continue. I still don't do all of the things, or probably none of those things now, but I've gotten to understand all of that, so I can actually recruit people who could work in this. Just imagine if you'd ask someone to, you know, I'm the CEO of a company and I'm getting people to do something, but I don't understand what they're doing. It would not make sense. So for me, it was like understanding, then knowing who to get. And for us, at the beginning, we figured out, okay, I want to create a mobile app. There's nobody that has 3 years experience in mobile apps in 2011. So I'll get someone who has experience in engineering, I mean, in coding, and he'll do that. And we did a lot of experience on back end, front end, and so many things. And then I realized that the hardest thing is not learning the new technology, you know, for Objective-C and iOS or Java at the time for Android, but it's actually unlearning. Mm-hmm. Unlearning is way harder than learning. So I could not actually get someone who's been working in something, in some whatever, for 5 years, and then tell him, you know, forget everything you know, now we're doing something for the mobile. So the screen is not big anymore, it's small, and you have to plan stuff on a very small screen, and it would be just as fine. Now, obviously, it did not make sense. So once we iterated with many people, we realized that actually we needed to get someone fresh, not in our engineers would make sense to be fresh, not to be, you know, people smart and fresh, rather than someone who has a lot of unlearning to do. That was critical in the life of Anghami. Mm-hmm.
Great. Elie, I would like to move on and talk a bit about the product development approach. I'm curious to know, how do you come up with new features to enhance the product? So you clearly come a long way since 2012, starting with the very basic MVP. And now you have a lot of unique features to Anghami, such as the social aspects and all the social features that you've included. So can you kind of walk us through the product design process from idea stage? Like, I'm assuming you're pretty close to your customers to be able to add all of these very relevant features that people just love, right? So from the customer feedback and input to kind of just filtering through all of that and deciding what's going on your roadmap and just kind of a product approach.
Yes. First, you know, first thing first, when we started, we wanted, as I said, to give, you know, access to everything, because that was the geeky part I said. Whereby we give you access to all the music. And then we realized that nobody wants all the music. Okay? So that was part of us learning. Nobody wants everything. People want stuff that they care about. So that's when we realized that we needed to give people stuff, not that they need, but they crave for. So that's the difference. I mean, why you should give people stuff that they crave for, not that they need, not stuff that they need, because they need something today, they need something else tomorrow, but they crave is something they constantly want. We realized that based on talking to people and, you know, going out of the building, a lot of that stuff does not happen by data and whatever. A lot of it we learned it by data, and I'm going to talk about it. But a lot of that happened by us going and sitting in universities and randomly talking to people and trying to see how they're using our product. Mm-hmm. At the time, we realized that people do not remember the name of the songs, right? So they know, that song of Michael Jackson, but what was it? I mean, if I actually gave them the list of the songs of Michael Jackson, it's going to be hard for them to figure out which one was it. Mm-hmm. So the point is, we realized that we might be music freaks, but most of the people aren't freaks. 20, maybe it's a 20-80 rule, which is the important rule of product development. I mean, we focused on the 20%, not on the 80%. The 80% are people who just want to get good music and want the app to give them continuously good music, and not them figuring out what they want to listen to. Mm. So for us, then we realized, and this is something that we still live by today, we want to iterate. For us, iteration beats perfection every single day. I mean, I don't want to be perfect. I know that whatever feature we release and we go out with it is not going to be perfect. I mean, damn, if I wanted Anghami to be perfect, I would still be working with it without going live, because for me, it's not perfect. But the point is, the massive thing we learned is that when we iterate and put something out, and then at the same time, measure everything. Yeah. Measure everything. Why? Because we want to have a chance at improving anything. If you don't measure, that you don't know what works, what doesn't work. The point is, we come up with an idea, let's say, we can't actually, every time we have an idea, go do an analysis, go out of the building and test it otherwise, because that is the part whereby we have a vision. So we have a vision, you can't, if like Henry Ford usually said, if I wanted to ask people what do they want, they would have told me they wanted faster horses, not cars. Nobody knew that anyone wanted cars, right? They did not know what a car was. So for us, we could not go ask people, do you want a product like Anghami, when they did not know what is streaming, what is a recurrent subscription. Everybody, wondered, how are we going to do something that will get, will charge you every single month. At the time, when we started charging in March 2013, nobody had a recurrent anything, right? Let alone was paying anyway for a digital service. So we started subscription because we believed it would make sense, but that was a vision that we saw that makes sense, but nobody would understand it. So for us, again, it's important. You have a vision, you try to build on top of it, and then you try to validate it with the people. While remembering that if you're not ready to be wrong, then you will never create anything original. You will only copy people. So some stuff you have to be ready to accept that it won't work. And we've had so many of those failures. So many times I said, this is what will work. We're going to do 1, 2, 3. And then we tested. My idea failed miserably every time. The other ideas, because we always test, and this is very important for us, we always test. So we have a saying in the office, in God we trust. Put that aside. In the rest, we test. So we test everything. Anytime we want to do something, we say, okay, Elie has an idea. I don't know, Omar has an idea. Helmi has an idea. We're going to test 3 ideas, figure out which one works. Obviously, because I'm the product guy and I'm the whatever founder, people respect me slightly more. But then they learn that this is not a CEO experience. It's a user experience. That's what matters. The CEO comes last, not first. The CEO has to serve the team, the users, the investors, right? But not serve himself. So, right, if I want to do a product that's just for me, it'll be Anghami with like around 200 songs, and that's it. Nobody's going to use it, right?
Yeah, it's really about just putting the customers. Sorry, Tambi. At the center of everything you. Yeah.
Right.
Elie, so you've mentioned, right, like everything's based on data. So what tools do you use at Anghami to get all that product analytics? And are there any specific also customer feedback channels where you get to engage with and communicate with your customers?
First, it's important that, you know, Anghami is built, Anghami's best asset has always been and will always be is our engineers, you know, and it's important that we actually ended up building a lot of the tools that we use, unlike others. Why? It's like because my engineers wanted to build stuff and wanted to make sure that we're in control. Maybe that's part of what I am personally. Is like I wanted to be in control of my environment. So we ended up building a lot of the tools ourselves. For instance, A/B testing tools. There are a lot in the market, and a lot of them are pretty good. There are a lot of good tools, but we ended creating our own. Why? Because we tested a lot of them, and we figured out that they're significantly expensive at our scale, and at the same time, no tool fits everything that we wanted. So we ended up creating our own tools, and that are totally integrated within our ecosystem and provide us superior value. But obviously, some products I refused to build them because we needed to have a third-party validation. For instance, analytics. I'm not going to build an analytics products, even though my team wanted, still insist. But we use Amplitude. Yeah. Amplitude is we're one of the first users of Amplitude. I connected with the CEO at the time in an event, and we were one of the first users who used Amplitude. We still use it till today because it makes a lot of sense for us. It's a third-party tool that enables us to segment everything that we want, create all the type of analysis and vectors and funnels that we want. I think we send to Amplitude maybe 30, 40 billion events a year. So something like huge number of events, because we track a lot of things, and we constantly learn from what we send to Amplitude. But Amplitude is, as I said, is one of the most important tools we use to create, to understand our user base. But we created our own machine learning algorithms, which allow us to understand the behavior of the user. So basically, for instance, predicting churn, every day I can predict what users are most likely not going to come back tomorrow because they had a bad experience today with us, right? And we learn from those users to get better the next day. This thing is stuff that we build in-house. That product, we could eventually create a product, a service for it for different startups, but we don't have the time to do it. But that is important because for me, in terms of building product, first we want to understand what our users like, what the users don't like. So what we focus on is day zero. So when the users come, what do they do so they stick and come the next day? And on the other hand, what doesn't work for them so that they decide not to come the next day? So that is, generally speaking, if you have a restaurant, you see people walking in, and maybe they look at the restaurant, they see the menu, and they say, okay, thank you, and they leave. Right? So you see them, but in our case, we don't see anybody. I mean, physically, but we notice their their usage and what they do that they don't like. Right? For instance, if it was a restaurant, someone would have asked for soup. You told them, no, sorry, we ran out of soup today. Say, okay, thank you, please, I wanted soup. In this case, the user will not give you feedback. Now, in terms of feedback, we connected our system using an external tool, again, for customer support, which is Zendesk. I think Zendesk is quite known, whereby we create an experience whereby there is a Q&A for the user. They can chat with customer support within the app and outside the app, and they can connect with us and ask the question over, the user might ask a question over Twitter, then another one over Instagram, over Facebook. For a user, all of them is Anghami. It doesn't matter whether they're talking within the app or an email or whatever. All of them it's Anghami, and they expect fast reply, right? I mean, they don't for them, it's obvious. If I'm talking to Twitter, it's as if it's a normal customer support, or I'm talking. I mean, for a customer, the customer doesn't worry about your problem. He worries about his own problem. That's what we've learned in ample times. You have to solve the problem of the customer. It doesn't care whether it's a day off, whether it's night, whether it's morning. He needs his problem solved. So again, in terms of tooling, external tools, Amplitude and Zendesk are probably the ones that are user-facing, that are external, but we've built tons internal. Most important thing that we've built is a transparent organization, whereby an engineer is able to see what's happening with other teams, with other organizations within Anghami, with other projects that are happening, and understanding what's happening with the users. Any engineer can go to Amplitude, figure out a certain funnel that he's interested in, try to figure out, why use one or a team of analysts when everybody can be analysts. I always tell people, we're not selling Pampers, diapers. And the thing is simple. If you're selling diapers, it's a great job. I mean, it's a great company, startup, Pampers or whatever, but you might not use it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you might have kids, but you not have kids. But in any case, you don't use the Pampers. You apply it. In our case, we're users of our products. So we might be creating the product between 9 to 5, as an example. But when we leave the office, in the car, we're listening to our product. So we're actually users. And that's a gem over here, whereby you can actually use my people at the same time as creators and consumers. And once you empower your team to figure out that they are shaping the products as they are using it, everybody feels that they're more empowered.
I think that's exactly it. That is golden, right? Once you are the user, that is a huge advantage to the company, because you get to empathize, right? And I'm guessing a lot of the feature ideas come from the internal team as users of Anghami.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So just going back,
the social experience you mentioned, it started internally. You know why it started? Why they started internally, the discussion around the social features in Anghami, roughly 3 years ago. And why did it start? Because they saw the original pitch deck of Anghami. The original pitch deck of Anghami, very funny, had the idea that we're actually launching in a week. Next week, we're launching an idea whereby we're launching a product whereby anybody can create a live radio within Anghami, so that people could actually listen to music together in a room, if you want to call it. And anybody can create a room with friends, or I can create a room because I'm a radio host, influencer, or whatever, and I'm going to listen to create music and chat and talk, voice and all of that within the room. That idea was part of the original pitch deck that we launched on Anghami, but we could not start implementing it when we launched. We got back to it 3 years ago, and we're launching it next week. So you see, some ideas take a lot to iterate, but at the same time, we were building the base of Anghami, and my team figured out that idea made a lot of sense, and we're ignoring it, and that is exactly what we need. And anyway, we're launching soon.
And that was very unique to what you're doing, right? It was actually a few days ago, I got this notification, like I saw this on the news somewhere. Spotify is just adding that feature, the social aspect, right? And that brings
Spotify is adding something basic, but it's irrelevant from what we're doing. It's the Spotify feature is very minimal from what we're doing. And Spotify is not adding exactly social, it's adding the ability for you to listen together with someone. In our case, I can't talk much because we're beta testing it, but we're launching for everyone next week, so it's close.
That brings me actually to my next question. So you've gotten to a really great place now. You're really competing on a global landscape, right? Now Spotify, Deezer have been in the MENA region for a couple of years. So I'm curious to know, like, what's your strategy when it comes to product differentiation? and maintaining market leadership?
Yeah, yes. So I was trying to, okay. I was trying to reply to something while typing. I just replied.
Yeah.
Uh,
No worries.
so, product differentiation is very important, but again, you know, when you launch in any market, a lot of you're supposed to localize. That's what you've been told. In our case, we built entire Anghami into which is not just the consumer facing aspect, localized for the region. And it's beyond writing in right to left. It's beyond the small tidbits in Arabic. Anghami is very different from what Spotify is today, or from Deezer or Apple Music. Competition is very important. Obviously, it's easy to say competition is very important, but we lived it. You know, in 2000, and for 2018, the Spotify and Deezer launched. Everybody thought that when they launch, we're going to be dead or something. It's the same thing that everybody thought in 2015 when Apple Music was launching in the Middle East, that Anghami is not going to be there anymore or whatever. We did not feel Apple Music launching that much. 2019 was our biggest year ever in terms of Plus subscription. And that happened after Spotify and Deezer. So the point is, I mean, the market in the Middle East, regardless however you want to weigh it, let's just say it's 100 million people. It's way more, just assuming that. People who are already using a music streaming service are a minority versus people that are not using. So the point is, one, is very important, there is room for more than one player. So basically, I'm not, when any service is launching, it's like, fine, they can compete to take from my user base, but I'm actually much more interested in taking from the free user base, the piracy user base, which is huge, which is still the most important and growth that we're still growing from, right? I mean, Anghami has grown and we're still growing month over month. Why? Because we understand and treat the users differently. Our user experience in Anghami is not equal to any of the other apps so far. The social feature, as you've mentioned before, and what we're launching over the next week and over the next months, actually, we're bringing Anghami also to the social idea that we've been working over the past 2 years, but it's quite complicated to at the same time build something that you have a vision in and you don't have any product that is available there that's similar to you. Why? Because we believe that social aspect is very, very important. That creates a huge differentiation, and we're living it. We're seeing the growth and the retention that we're having once someone started using the social aspect. So for instance, anybody who's into the social aspect of Anghami has friends, people that they connect to, and has music, playlists, and all of that. So all of that is a community. He can't take the community with him over another app because community makes you sticky. So the more that maybe we have close to 25% of our user base who's using our social aspect, but the stickiness of that part of the user base versus all others is significantly different. So with what we're launching more and more, it will be even more different. But again, in terms of the artists, we as consumers, we see Anghami as a consumer play. But again, we have an artist, which is, you know, it's a community that we're using, we have on Anghami. That's the users, fans, then the artists. The artists in the region are not exactly the major labels. We have a lot of indies. We have a lot of artists that don't have labels. And those actually, we have a system for them in Anghami that allow them to upload their music directly without going through labels, to promote their music, to get all of that stuff happen directly with us. Nobody, no label, no platform from the remaining ones, from the other ones, provide anything for the local artists. And that allows us to be close to them. So for instance, whenever an artist uploads new music on Anghami, the music gets to be launched, he gets a message on WhatsApp. He gets everyday update on WhatsApp on his music. I mean, why do we do that? Because that's very important to be close to them, to allow them to provide more opportunities. And we also created a platform for advertisers to allow advertisers to upload ads to Anghami to promote, to reach their user base in a very sophisticated format. And we've won a lot of awards on what we've provided over time. Why? Because we're not competing with Facebook over here. Our advertising platform provides much different value to advertisers, whether small or large. And now we launched a way to allow advertisers to, create campaigns by themselves, and like a Facebook ad, like Google, all of that within our own platform. So when we look at one angle, for us it's different. Anghami is the only platform that provides consumers, for instance, with payment with telcos, with 36 telcos. Our competitors, I think there's one that has 2 telcos, another that has 0 telcos. In our case, we understand the behavior. It's not about doing Arabic RTL. It's about providing a way that they can pay, for instance, a premium service. And we've invested a lot in education, because most of the users don't understand why they pay and how they pay. And it took us a lot to get users to pay recurrently. And I'm proud of where we are today, but I know there's a lot of challenges. COVID also is a lot of challenges, but I enjoy every day, because it's a valley and the mountain. It depends whether it's a Monday or Tuesday, but that's how startup is.
Yeah.
By the way, can I just interject here? I love how Anghami is like a two-sided platform, by the way, if you think about it. The artists, the listeners, or I don't know what you call them, consumers, fans. Yeah, building this platform and making it work in every country is, I think, where you nailed it in localization. Because no matter, even the other, like, let's say, players in the world, it's going to be hard for them. And I think that's the distinguishing factor, I would say. Like, you actually make it work together, like the platform, artists and fans. Sorry, I just have to give you credit for that.
But for us, there's a lot of learning that goes. And originally, we never thought about the multi-sided platform. We thought only about users. We thought that the rest will happen, via labels. Then we realized that the region does not have big labels, and a lot of the artists are simple. You have a lot of talent in the region, but those talents don't know how to monetize their talents and don't know how to, get access. Once we realized that it could be the radio of the Middle East, you could launch your song on Anghami and immediately get it to millions of users. We realized that we needed to invest in the artist. Obviously, we did not invest on the artist angle the first several years, but then we invested much more. And the advertisers angle, we did not invest also, again, for the many years, because we did not believe in advertising model. But then I realized that I was missing on a lot of opportunity.
Elie, we still have a lot of questions for you, but time is running out, and we have quite a lot of questions lined up. So just before jumping into Q&A, we have a final wrap up. We'd love to hear your book recommendations, book and podcast recommendations. What are your favorite books and favorite podcast friends?
I read a lot of books. I mean, if I have to pick one book, I mean, I could give a lot, but I give one book. It would be Loon Shots. Okay, it's Loon with an L. I'll share the link. Loon Shot is a book by Safi Bakal. It's a book that talks about how a lot. It's the guy that wrote it is a physicist. It's how to nurture crazy ideas that actually end up, succeeding across verticals. So Safi talks about ideas that won wars, literally, and about ideas that actually created a change in the medical industry, in tech, and so many things. The point is, that book was one of my, I think I read it 3 times, but again, if I had to give one book, it would be this one. There are a lot of books that I've read. One that I also love a lot and I enjoyed is The $1 Trillion Coach. Another book that I'll share the links, by the way. Another book that I've recently read contains a lot of stories. I'm trying to remember I remember the name of the author. I'll write the name of the book in a bit.
You can send it to me and I can share it afterwards as well.
Yeah. I mean, the point is, okay, I'm writing. This is the Safi Bakal book. So I like stories. We all like stories that gets us back to when we were kids, when someone will tell us about a story and then how that story will connect to us. I mean, we still probably remember all of those stories and till that day. In that book, there's a story about someone called Toussaint Louverture. Toussaint Louverture was a slave in Haiti. And that slave grew to actually create the constitution of Haiti and so much. And that story, once I read it, it taught me how leaders have the ability to make changes. So that guy put a lot to make changes for the country. But again, I'm not going politics right now. The point is, us, when we're in our own companies, when we are in our own startups, have to actually decide how to put culture, as part of everything that we do, so that the company grows on the right side. So a lot of the things when I read the Toussaint Louverture's book, a lot of it inspires me. Sorry, that book that mentioned Toussaint Louverture, it's not the Toussaint Louverture book.
It's Ben Horowitz book, I think.
It's Ben Horowitz. Yeah, exactly. I was trying to find the name while typing, but my brain doesn't follow properly. I will share it. I will share the link while talking. So basically, the guy, Toussaint Louverture, decided that he has to ask his army to do stuff that do not make sense because he wanted to create a right culture. So for instance, when they were doing the war, and it's in 1800, there were basically a lot of the wars happened by, you go into a city and you burn the city and you rape the woman, and all of that used to happen in wars. For him, it was totally forbidden for anyone to rape or rape anybody, because he told his army, you're married and you have an oath. And if your wife does not trust you, how am I gonna trust you? So basically trust became important in wars. And the guy, even though they were slaves, insisted that they have to wear good clothes to inspire others to follow them, right? Because if they were in rags and going from city to city, I mean, it will be hard to have other slaves joining them while they're in rags, right? He figured out one trick. Now they call it a hack, growth hack or whatever. It's like, just have good clothes so people will get inspired to join us because they will have good clothes, right? And then he grew out a big army out of small stuff. He refused to kill the white owners that were enslaving them, because he knew that the white owners knew how to sell sugar and coffee. That's the business part. If he actually killed them, then he would actually couldn't keep exporting. The economy would be affected, and then there would be another revolution on him because he wouldn't be feeding them. So that's leadership, and that's leadership that we do every day when we're building a company or anything. It's always easier than a slave in the 18th century. We're lucky. We're in good offices anyway.
Really inspired.
Thank you.
I think I shared 3 books.
Yeah, they're all in the chat for anybody who wants them. We've got the links.
I have more, but that's enough for the time.
These are your favorites.
Yeah.
So moving on to Q&A, we've got quite a few. So I'm gonna go, I think this is a great question. So got somebody asking about your pricing model. So how hard was it for you to figure out pricing for Anghami, and how long did it take? And it also kind of links with another question, which is asking about the different challenges that you faced early on and continue to face in the Arab world when it comes to monetizing.
Yeah, I'm gonna start from the second one and go to the first one. That was why we wanted to fail fast and start doing monetization earlier on. So we started, as I said, in Jordan with monetization. 3 months later, with everybody with monetization. Others were telling us, you know, wait a couple of years before doing monetization so you get a bigger base. But it did not make sense for me to actually grow a base that is unhealthy and then eventually leak it all. We thought that it would be good to fail fast originally by figuring out that people could not pay, were not willing to pay for music, or that people are willing to pay for music. Either of those would good enough to happen at the beginning. We wanted to test with different price points. So we actually did a lot of tests with different segments. So some users were getting different price than other user base. That's the beauty of the digital product. You don't have to advertise the digital product price. So we tested, and we wanted actually to go below the current price that we have right now. And all our data indicated that a slightly less than $5, around $4 would be the ideal price, but with all our tests that we made, because we tested between $4 to $7 a month, and the $4 was the best one. But unfortunately, labels did not accept our $4. That's the first time I tell that story, accept our $4 pricing, except in Egypt. So they accepted the lower one in Egypt, which is $2.5, whereby in the remaining ones, they set it to be at $5. The trick that we found was to be able to introduce lower pricing when we are associated with mobile operators, because there is scale. That's why originally we grew on top of mobile operators, because we were able to provide bundles or different pricing with telcos, while at the same time iterating with consumer with different price points. This is probably was the most comprehensive and hard exercise to do. But then we realized that, you know, one trick was to do different tiny periods. So basically right now in certain countries, you can buy Anghami by the day, by week, or by months. That's a trick by actually trying to figure out the right balance of pricing. People at the beginning, nobody wanted to pay, right? If you can not pay, why would you pay? I mean, that's a human thing. I know I'm an engineer, and, you know, back when I was in university, I cared only about courses which were involving coding and stuff. But right now, if I had to do it again, I'll probably spend more time on consumer psychology courses, because at the end, I realized that I'm a psychologist. You know, I'm in psychology because I have a team that I have to nurture, and because I have users that I know how to talk to. A lot of the time, copywriting makes or breaks a company. You know, by testing different texts, we realize that sometimes an empathic text might get people paying because they're empowered by paying once it's a good text, versus another text that's cheaper but not empathic. So if you're actually empathic, you can get people paying more. And that's why eventually we realize that people are willing to pay. Let's say, and I think I mentioned it right now, in COVID times, people are much more willing to pay via credit card than ever. Why? Because they got used to. Because that's why that's important. And whenever you do something, you should be mindful of the other experiences. Once Anghami launched and we started having subscriptions, we were having problems with people recurring the next months. The first month was easy. Paying again was problematic because they thought they paid the previous months, you're ripping us off the next month. But once Netflix started in the region, it was easier for Netflix and also easier for us. Eventually, it was easier for all subscription industries because we launched again first. So now it's way better.
Yeah. Great. So another question that goes back to culture. So somebody's saying that Anghami has really built a very strong reputation when it comes to your engineering culture. So he's asking, how do you maintain that within your product technology teams, especially at scale as the company is growing?
Yeah, first thank you for that question. I mean, I care about my team most. I think I built a better team than a product, but what's important is that if you challenge the team, if you challenge the team, they want to learn more. And then instead of you having one brain, you suddenly have 100 brains. So why have one if you can have 100, right? It makes no sense. So eventually all our team become part of our product and become empowered in trying to find better solutions. So instead of actually saying, it will be great to have, to try to test X and Y, I can actually talk to an engineer, tell them, do you think you can actually build this and this and this by that time? That would be quite interesting. And if you challenge an engineer and a good engineer, you'll figure out that, ideas come from everywhere. By creating an open, transparent organization and creating right vision, the vision become contagious. So when I see that the team, my engineers are way better than me. I mean, I have experience, but they don't. But they're learning much faster than me, right? And all of them, by simply me challenging people, by them pushing them to the maximum of their potential, I end up creating a culture that understands that, I'm not an engineer, just a simple engineer who's supposed to just do what the product manager tells them or whatever. I'm a person who can actually contribute, who can come up with ideas. So when I see an engineer, working at night to beyond, what's expected, to come up the next day with an idea, that's when I figure out, I did something right. Yeah. And that's what empowers me to do more. And we're still building, we still have a lot of stuff that we want to do, but we do it by prioritizing on impact towards time. If I want to do something, they measure, they say, okay, the impact of this idea that that I want to build is reaching, I don't know, maybe 80% of the user base. The time to implement is a week. Oh my God, a week to reach 80% versus something that is pretty cool that will reach 5% of my user base. It's pretty cool. It's AR and VR and blockchain will reach 10% of my user base, will take a year. Yeah. I mean, obviously that's an example.
Yeah. No, that's great.
It's close.
Yeah. Technology, someone asked about technology. Technology matters. But for instance, I'm wary from new technologies. When you have a technology, that you can't, you don't have a community attached to it, it's very new. It might be very interesting, very promising, but you don't have a community behind it, because we work on open source stuff 99% of the time, then it's cool, but I don't want to take all the risks. So sometimes we want to experiment, like we've experimented, example, with MongoDB back in the days. It was the coolest technology, but then we realized that it does not scale towards what we want. So we rolled it out. We experimented a lot of the things. We use now kind of document database also, not Mongo. But the point is, really, the silliest technology would still enable you to build the most wide used product. Example, Facebook. They still use PHP till now, PHP 5 till now. The new product that they launched, Facebook, yesterday, there's a product that they launched called Catch Up. The server side of the product is PHP 5.6. I checked it. So basically, it's not the technology, it's the idea. The execution, you can build in anything, right? And you can try with anything. And then eventually, when it gets to scale, you'll scale it. Right now, we scale on containers easily with we can scale all on containers, but the technology within the container doesn't really matter.
Great.
Podcasts are Samer Tarazi. Podcasts are growing significantly in terms of percentage, but the time used per day per user is still low. The potential is there, but what needs to be done is the monetization. It's all, when the term follow the money, it's important. So right now we've invested a lot of things, you know, and we're still investing in podcasts, but probably not as much because we still have not invested in a way to provide real monetization to podcast makers so that they can, you know, grow that. We're intent. This is something that's, you know, close to us, and we're one of the features that we're launching very soon will enable people to create a podcast within Anghami, and, you know, have, you know, multiple people talking within Anghami and then we will add more, monetization to it. But the whole point is enable people to create podcasts in an easy way, you know, because what's a podcast if not a radio show that's teaching you something new? And a lot of us can do that, but you have to make it mass for the mass. Sorry.
Looking forward to that, because I know a lot of people who are interested in monetizing podcasts. Elie, can we take 2 more questions? Do you have the time?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I think one question which is from Ala as well, like what do you do when you are overwhelmed between building products, selling it, and raising funds as a founder? I think everyone is struggling.
I cook and I bike.
You cook and you bike. I bike as well, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't cook while biking. Right? That's very important. I'm a product person, so I like to create products. When I walk into the kitchen and, you know, and my kids want me to cook something, and I open, the cupboard and pick stuff and figure out what do I have in the fridge and create something new. It's a product for me. It's the same thing, you know, you figure out what and start testing something new, because I don't want to do the same thing, because I don't like to do the same thing. And, you know, I end up, you know, doing the magic of creating something, and that magic is what I crave daily. And when you go into the kitchen, you're creating a new product. It's called food, but that's a new thing every day. And that is because I enjoy, you know, I've never read a recipe book, but I created so much food because I like to enjoy creating. And when I buy, it's because I want to forget and get my brain resting. And, you know, but I like to read a lot. I read daily. I think I read a couple of hours every morning. Sometimes not books, it's blog posts, it's Twitter. It's, you know, you learn from so many different people, and you mostly learn from experience of others. And that's great if you can, you know, you don't have to make the mistake, but you get to see others make the mistake, and that to talk about that mistake is amazing. And we need to learn to be open more and talk about mistakes.
Awesome. Do you have any other questions that you had your eye on, or like?
Sorry?
Do you have any other questions that you liked? You can.
I mean, I don't have that much more time. I actually right now broke the curfew. It's 7:10. I'm supposed to be home by 7, which I passed. But I'll try to answer the questions. I don't know if it remains. I can
do it on a different platform.
Yeah. Someone asked a question I was trying to answer. Sorry, Ala asked something about how can I answer, how can you reach me, or someone asked that. I made a mistake by typing live. It's elie@anghami.com is my email. I'm sorry I couldn't answer everything. I hope I answered the most. Use .NET or anything. I mean, it clearly doesn't matter. When you're starting something, it doesn't matter. When you're scaling, it matters. Again, figure out the community. It's great. I mean, there might be great technologies, but you can't find people where you are that can work on that technology. That does not make it a good technology. I wouldn't encourage .NET at the back, Hala, but if you have a lot of good .NET people, it doesn't matter, because, you know, there are tons of great sites that are built on .NET. So honestly, it doesn't matter what I think, as long as you have people who've built .NET product at scale. That's a problem, because sometimes, you know, we see people building something that is small, but scaling something takes a lot of, it's a different art to learn how to scale stuff versus building something that gets hundreds of people. For us, performance is the most important thing, and scaling while not scaling the cost is an art. For us, every year we're growing, but our infrastructure cost has to go down because we have to get better at scaling with less. And that is part of my KPI. And thankfully, every month we're growing at lesser cost. You learn, with time how to do more with less. And if you have a lot of money, you end up spending because you don't care if your infrastructure cost is low or more, is low or high. But at the end, once you figure out you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars of infrastructure, realize that if I actually funnel 25% of those to my engineers, they're going to do magic with it.
Oh, well said. Thank you. Lean, go ahead.
Okay, everyone.
No, I just want to wrap this up. I know you're past your curfew, and thank you for risking that. So, Elie, this was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. As Elie mentioned, for anybody who wants to connect, they can reach you on your email, right? Elie at
I sometimes might take up to 48 hours to reply, but I generally reply. I also am available on Twitter. That's my Twitter account. I just sent it. I also generally answer. I mean, I always answer, but just with my cue.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
I hope you learned something. It's good to get people to do better than us.
It's all about sharing. 100%.
Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Bye-bye.